In a brutal universe ruled by cold logic, they called humans soft until we weaponized the very thing they despised: empathy. Sergeant Bruce Bell, a battle-scarred human soldier haunted by the horrors of war, finds himself ripped from the front lines and thrust into the heart of the enemy's domain. The mighty Arcturians, known for their calculated ruthlessness and disdain for human emotion, have a shocking request. They need Bruce's empathetic abilities for a top-secret project that could turn the tide of the relentless galactic conflict. Suspicious yet desperate to end the bloodshed, Bruce enters the sterile confines of the Arcturian research facility on planet Jahkor. There, he meets Raxor, a brilliant Arcturian scientist who believes that human empathy, amplified and harnessed, could become the ultimate weapon against Arcturian aggression. As they delve into the untapped power of emotion, Bruce grapples with his own inner demons, knowing that failure means not just his own demise, but the fall of humanity itself. With each experiment, the stakes grow higher. The potential to manipulate and control through weaponized empathy becomes increasingly clear. In a war-torn galaxy on the brink of collapse, Bruce must navigate the treacherous alliance, walking the line between salvation and damnation. The fate of billions hangs in the balance as he races to unravel the secrets of this audacious venture, one that could either bring peace to the stars or seal humanity's doom in a chilling new era of Arcturian dominance. In a universe where cold logic reigns supreme, can the power of human emotion prevail? Or will Bruce's mission to weaponize empathy prove to be humanity's final fatal mistake? In the sterile confines of the Arcturian research facility, Bruce and Raxor work tirelessly to unravel the secrets of empathetic resonance. Raxor's eyes gleamed with excitement as he revealed his most ambitious project yet, the empathic amplifier. Bruce studied the intricate device, a tangle of wires and pulsing crystals that promised to magnify human emotions to an unprecedented scale. With this, we can disarm entire Arcturian battalions without shedding a single drop of blood, Raxor said, his voice trembling with anticipation. Your empathetic abilities, Bruce, will be the key to our success. Bruce nodded, his teeth gritted with tenacity. The weight of humanity's fate pressed upon his shoulders as they prepared for their first test. As the empathic amplifier hummed to life, Bruce focused his mind, reaching out with his empathetic senses. Suddenly, a tidal wave of alien emotions crashed over him. Despair, rage, fear, all amplified 1,000-fold. Bruce's knees buckled, and he collapsed to the floor, his mind fracturing under the onslaught. Raxor rushed to his side, his face etched with concern. The human brain isn't designed to handle such intense feedback, he muttered, already formulating a solution. I'll need to develop a neural interface to protect your mind. As Bruce recovered, doubts began to creep into his thoughts. Could a weapon that manipulated emotions be trusted? What if it fell into the wrong hands? Raxor sensed his unease and confided his own misgivings about the Arcturian Empire's iron grip on its people. I dream of a future where my kind are free from emotional suppression, he said quietly. This device could be the key to our liberation. Their conversation was cut short by the sound of heavy footsteps approaching the lab. Commander Zolak, an imposing figure in his gleaming armor, strode into the room, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. I'm here to inspect your progress, Zolak announced, his gaze sweeping over the cluttered workbenches. The High Command grows impatient. Bruce and Raxor exchanged a tense glance, scrambling to conceal any evidence of their true intentions. They led Zolak on a carefully choreographed tour, showcasing innocuous weapons prototypes and fabricated data. But Zolak's suspicions only deepened. He lingered in the lab, his presence a suffocating weight. Bruce's heart raced as he watched Raxor deftly navigate Zolak's probing questions, knowing that one misstep could unravel everything. As Zolak finally departed, Bruce and Raxor knew they were running out of time. They worked with renewed urgency, reaching out to resistance cells across the galaxy, sowing the seeds of rebellion. In the depths of the Arcturian night, Bruce tested the neural interface, his mind shielded as he unleashed a wave of empathetic energy. The air shimmered with the force of 1,000 souls, and for a moment he glimpsed the profound impact their device could have on the war. But the specter of Zolak's suspicion loomed large, and Bruce knew that every passing day brought them closer to discovery. As he looked to the stars, he wondered if the power of human empathy would be enough to topple an empire, or if their audacious gambit would be their undoing. As the neural interface neared completion, Bruce and Raxor exchanged a determined glance. It was time to put their audacious plan into action. They chose a remote Arcturian military outpost on Jakor's moon as their testing ground, hoping to gauge the empathic amplifier's effectiveness and sway the soldiers stationed there. Bruce donned the neural interface, now cleverly disguised as standard Arcturian military gear, and they infiltrated the outpost under the guise of a routine inspection. The sterile corridors echoed with their footsteps as they made their way to the heart of the facility. Once inside, Bruce activated the empathic amplifier, focusing his empathetic energy on the unsuspecting Arcturian soldiers. The device surged to life, and a wave of emotion rippled through the room. The soldiers' stoic expressions faltered, replaced by a flicker of doubt and confusion. "Why are we fighting this war?" one soldier murmured, his voice tinged with newfound uncertainty. "What is the Empire truly fighting for?" another questioned, her gaze distant. Raxor watched in awe as the soldiers began to question their orders and express doubts about the Empire's motives. The empathic amplifier was working better than they had ever dreamed. However, their triumph was short-lived. The base commander, a grizzled veteran named Kraylock, strode into the room, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. He had proven more resistant to the device's effects, and his presence sent a chill down Bruce's spine. "What is the meaning of this?" Kraylock demanded, his hand hovering over his weapon. Bruce stepped forward, the empathic amplifier humming with energy. In a last-ditch effort to connect with Kraylock, he focused his empathetic powers, sharing his own memories of the horrors of war and the toll it had taken on both their species. Kraylock's eyes widened as the images flooded his mind. The weight of countless battles, the pain of lost comrades, the weariness of an endless conflict, all of it washed over him in a tidal wave of emotion. His hand trembled, and he slowly lowered his weapon. "I'm tired of fighting," Kraylock confessed, his voice raw with emotion. "I want a better future for our people." Raxor seized the opportunity and revealed the true purpose of their mission. He spoke passionately about the potential of the empathic amplifier to end the war and bring peace to the galaxy. Kraylock listened intently, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. He saw a chance for change, a way to break free from the cycle of violence that had consumed their lives. With a nod of tenacity, he agreed to join their cause and help spread the word among his fellow soldiers. As Bruce and Raxor left the outpost, elation mixed with trepidation. They had achieved a significant victory, but they knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. Meanwhile, back at the research facility, Commander Zolak's suspicions grew stronger with each passing moment. He paced the sterile corridors, his mind racing with possibilities. The incident at the outpost had not gone unnoticed, and he was determined to uncover the truth. Zolak contacted his superior, Grand Admiral Thrax, and expressed his concerns about a potential uprising. Thrax's holographic image flickered to life, his face a mask of cold calculation. "A new weapon, you say?" Thrax mused, his eyes glinting with intrigue. "Uncover the truth, Commander Zolak. We cannot allow any threat to the Empire's dominion." Zolak nodded curtly and intensified his investigation. He interrogated facility staff, scoured security footage, and left no stone unturned in his quest for answers. As Bruce and Raxor returned to the facility, they found themselves face-to-face with Zolak. His gaze bore into them, demanding explanations. Raxor, ever quick-witted, spun a tale of a failed experiment and Bruce's struggles to control his empathetic outbursts. He painted a picture of setbacks and challenges, explaining away the incident at the outpost. Zolak listened, his expression unreadable. Though not entirely convinced, he had no choice but to accept their story for the time being. With Zolak's suspicions looming over them, Bruce and Raxor knew they had to act fast. They reached out to resistance cells and sympathetic Arcturians, using Kraylock's contacts to spread the word about the empathic amplifier and the impending revolt. As support for their cause grew in the shadows, Bruce and Raxor prepared for the moment of truth. They fine-tuned the device, strengthened their determination, and steeled themselves for the battle to come. The stage was set, the pieces in motion. In the sterile confines of the research facility, Bruce and Raxor stood on the precipice of change, ready to unleash the full power of weaponized empathy and reshape the future of the galaxy. The Arcturian Empire, with its cold logic and iron grip, would soon face a force it had never encountered before, the unwavering strength of human compassion. And in that moment, the fate of countless lives hung in the balance, waiting for the spark that would ignite the flames of revolution. The sterile corridors of the research facility echoed with the sound of hurried footsteps as Bruce and Raxor rushed to implement their plan. Kralok's underground network proved invaluable, providing them with secure channels to activate sleeper cells across multiple Arcturian colonies. "We've received confirmation from outposts on Xandar 7 and Vega Prime," Raxor announced, his eyes fixed on a holographic display. "The resistance is mobilizing." Bruce nodded, his fingers dancing across the neural interface controls. "We need to move fast. Zolak's breathing down our necks." As if summoned by his words, the lab doors hissed open, revealing Commander Zolak flanked by a squad of heavily armed guards. His eyes narrowed as he surveyed the room. "I've seen the communications logs," Zolak growled, his hand resting on his weapon. "You've been in contact with known insurgents. Explain yourselves." Raxor stepped forward, his voice calm despite the tension crackling in the air. "Commander, I assure you there's a perfectly logical explanation." "Enough!" Zolak barked, drawing his weapon. "You're under arrest for treason against the Empire." Time seemed to slow as Bruce locked eyes with Raxor. In that fraction of a second, a silent agreement passed between them. Bruce's hand shot out, activating the empathic amplifier at full power. The air shimmered as waves of raw emotion flooded the room. Zolak staggered, his weapon clattering to the floor as he clutched his head. His guards fared no better, overwhelmed by the sudden onslaught of feelings. Bruce gritted his teeth, channeling every ounce of empathy he possessed through the device. Memories of loss, pain, and the futility of war crashed over Zolak like a tidal wave. When the psychic storm subsided, Zolak looked up with tears in his eyes. I understand now," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "The suffering, it's endless. On both sides." Raxor seized the moment, explaining their true purpose. "We can end this cycle of violence, Commander. The empathic amplifier can bring understanding on a scale never before seen." Zolak's expression hardened with grit. "What do you need from me?" Within hours, Zolak's defection had provided them with crucial intelligence on the Empire's military deployments. But their triumph was short-lived. Alarms blared throughout the facility as reports flooded in of incoming purification squads. Grand Admiral Thrax had discovered their plan and was determined to crush it. Bruce donned the neural interface, his hands steady despite the chaos around him. "It's now or never," he said, meeting Raxor's gaze. As the first wave of purifiers breached the facility's defenses, Bruce activated the empathic amplifier. His mind expanded, connecting with resistance fighters across the galaxy. Their collective empathy surged through him, a wellspring of raw emotional power. The purifiers stormed into the lab, their minds cold and hostile. Bruce unleashed a psychic barrage, projecting waves of compassion and understanding. The leading purifiers faltered, their conditioning cracking under the emotional assault. But Grand Admiral Thrax was not so easily swayed. His psionic counterattack slammed into Bruce with the force of a supernova, threatening to overwhelm him. In that crucial moment, Raxor made his choice. "For the future of both our peoples," he said, grasping Bruce's hand. The Arcturian scientist's mind merged with the empathic amplifier, channeling the full force of empathetic resonance through Bruce. The resulting psychic explosion shattered Thrax's defenses, breaking his hold over the purifiers. As the Admiral's influence crumbled, the tide of battle shifted. Across the galaxy, reports flooded in of colonies rising up in open revolt. The empathic amplifier had united them in ways previously unimaginable. Bruce disconnected from the interface, his body trembling from the exertion. He looked to Raxor, seeing both triumph and uncertainty in his friend's eyes. "We've done it," Bruce said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But what happens now?" Raxor's gaze turned to the stars visible through the lab's viewport. Now, my friend, we shape the future of our civilizations, for better or worse. As the echoes of rebellion spread across the cosmos, Bruce and Raxor stood at the epicenter of a galactic transformation. The power to reshape minds and hearts was in their hands, a tool that could usher in an era of unprecedented peace or unravel the very fabric of their societies. As they contemplated the enormity of their achievement, the facility shook with the impact of orbital bombardments. "They're here," Raxor said, his voice tight with urgency. "We need to move." Bruce nodded, disconnecting the empathic amplifier and securing it in a reinforced case. They raced through the corridors, alarms blaring and emergency lights casting eerie shadows. Zolak led the way, his intimate knowledge of the facility proving invaluable as they evaded Imperial forces. As they emerged onto the landing pad, a rebel shuttle descended through a hail of anti-aircraft fire. Bruce felt a surge of hope as he recognized the pilot, Kralok, the converted Arcturian commander. "Get in!" Kralok shouted over the roar of the engines. They piled into the shuttle, which rocketed away from the facility moments before it erupted in a massive explosion. Bruce watched through the view screen as the research center, his home for so long, became a fireball receding into the distance. Over the next few weeks, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The empathic amplifier's effects had spread like wildfire, igniting rebellions on countless worlds. Bruce worked tirelessly, using the device to project waves of understanding and compassion to ever wider swaths of space. But the Empire wasn't going down without a fight. Grand Admiral Thrax, his mind now shielded against empathetic influence, deployed his most fearsome weapon, the Shadow Legions. On New Terra, a human colony world, Bruce witnessed firsthand the devastation wrought by these psionic warriors. Their minds were fortresses, impervious to his empathetic projections. As he stood on a hilltop overlooking the burning capital city, he felt a deep sense of failure. "My projections? They're not working," he said, his voice hollow. Raxor placed a hand on his shoulder. "We need something more, my friend, something to break through their defenses." The Jaran scientist's eyes lit up with sudden inspiration. "There are legends among my people," he said, "of an ancient race called the Althiri. They were said to possess the power to weaponize fear itself." Bruce turned to his friend, hope rekindling in his eyes. "Where do we find them?" Their search led them to the edge of known space, to a nebula so dense with psychotronic energy that their navigation systems failed within minutes of entering. As the shuttle tumbled through swirling clouds of cosmic dust, Bruce gripped the arms of his chair, his stomach churning. Just when it seemed they would be torn apart by the nebula's fury, a clearing appeared. Floating in the void was a massive structure, its architecture unlike anything Bruce had ever seen. They docked, the airlock hissing open to reveal corridors lined with hibernation chambers. In each pod, a being of ethereal beauty slumbered, their minds radiating an ancient power that made Bruce's empathetic senses real. A voice, both in his mind and in the air around them, spoke, "Who dares disturb our slumber?" Bruce stepped forward, projecting all the sincerity and urgency he could muster. "I am Bruce of Earth. We seek your help to end a war that threatens to consume the galaxy." A pod at the far end of the chamber opened with a soft hiss. From it emerged a being of such otherworldly grace that Bruce found himself at a loss for words. Her skin shimmered with an inner light, and her eyes held the wisdom of eons. "I am Kylara," she said, her voice resonating in Bruce's very bones. "You have awakened us for a noble cause. Come, human empath, let us see what we can do together." In a chamber deep within the Althiri sanctuary, Bruce lay on an ornate dais, his mind linked to the empathic amplifier. Kylara stood over him, her hands hovering inches above his temples. "Open your mind," she instructed. "Let the primal fears of the universe flow through you." Bruce gasped as images flooded his consciousness. The cold void of space, the heat death of stars, the gnawing terror of oblivion. He felt his empathy twist and reshape, infused with the essence of fear itself. When he opened his eyes, he saw the universe anew. Every emotion now carried an undercurrent of existential dread, a reminder of the fragility of all things. "It is done," Kylara said, helping him to his feet. "Use this power wisely, Bruce of Earth, for it can unmake minds as easily as it can open them." They raced back through the nebula, emerging to find the rebel fleet engaged in a desperate battle over Talbrex, the heart of the resistance. The Shadow Legions had the planet surrounded, their ships an impenetrable barrier. Bruce connected to the amplifier, took a deep breath, and projected. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Shadow Legion's psionic shields, so effective against pure empathy, crumbled before the onslaught of terror-infused emotion. Across the battlefield, Imperial ships veered off course as their crews grappled with newfound existential dread. But Grand Admiral Thrax was not so easily defeated. His flagship pushed through the chaos, its weapons locked on the rebel command center. Bruce felt the Admiral's mind, a bastion of cold logic and unshakable will. Thrax's psychic counterattack hit Bruce like a physical blow. He staggered, overwhelmed by images of his own failures, the lives lost in this war. For a moment he teetered on the brink of despair. Then he felt Raxor's hand on his shoulder, steadying him. In that touch he found an anchor, the deep bond of friendship that had carried them through so much. Bruce seized that feeling, amplified it, and broadcast it across the empathetic field. Love, camaraderie, the connections that gave life meaning, these emotions surged outward, washing over friend and foe alike. On the bridge of his flagship, Grand Admiral Thrax fell to his knees, his carefully constructed worldview shattered by the realization of all he had sacrificed in the name of empire. As the Admiral's steely determination crumbled, so too did the Imperial war machine. In the aftermath of the battle, as the first tenuous threads of peace were woven, Bruce stood on the observation deck of the rebel flagship. He watched as former enemies embraced, their differences washed away in the tide of shared emotion. Raxor joined him, his expression thoughtful. "We've won the war," the Jaran scientist said, "but the real challenge lies ahead." Bruce nodded, acutely aware of the power now at his fingertips. The empathic amplifier had brought peace, but at what cost? As celebrations erupted across the galaxy, he couldn't shake the feeling that they had opened a door that could never truly be closed. Closed. The euphoria of victory faded quickly as the newly formed Galactic Concordance grappled with the power vacuum left by the Arcturian Empire's collapse. Bruce watched from the command center as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Renegade Imperial warlords violently resisting integration, battles erupting over resource-rich sectors. "It's chaos out there," Raxor said, his eyes fixed on the holographic display of contested systems. "We've won the war, but peace seems just as elusive." Before Bruce could respond, an urgent transmission cut through the air. Admiral Kralok's face materialized, his expression grim. "We have a situation. The warlords are uniting under a new leader, General Kerval." Bruce felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard whispers of Kerval's brutality, even by Imperial standards. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that the Concordance Council is assigning us to neutralize him," Kralok replied. "His armada is growing by the day. We've tracked them to Vrachus III." The journey to Vrachus III was tense. The captured Imperial dreadnought they used as a mobile base filled with an air of unshakable focus. As they dropped out of hyperspace, Bruce's breath caught in his throat. The planet's atmosphere swirled with toxic clouds, its surface scarred by strip mining operations. Kerval's fleet hung in orbit, a filled wall of firepower between them and the planet. Without warning, space erupted into chaos as the Concordance fleet engaged the enemy. Bruce connected to the empathic amplifier, channeling his projections through the dreadnought's powerful transmitters. He expected to feel the familiar surge of emotions washing over the battlefield. Instead, he encountered a void. "Something's wrong," he gasped, breaking the connection. "Kerval's troops. I can't reach them." Raxor's fingers flew over the sensor controls. "Bioscans show extensive neural modifications. He's altered them at a fundamental level, Bruce. Their empathetic centers have been surgically removed." The battle turned brutal. Kerval's emotionless shock troops tore through Concordance lines with ruthless efficiency. Bruce watched helplessly as Allied ships erupted into balls of fire, their crew's final moments of terror searing into his empathetic senses. "We need to do something," Bruce said, desperation creeping into his voice, "or this will be a slaughter." A gentle hand touched his shoulder. He turned to see Kylara, the Altheri's ethereal presence a stark contrast to the violence unfolding around them. "There may be a way," she said, her voice resonating with ancient power. "We can use their shared terror against them. Funnel it back through the amplifier, directly into Craval's mind. Break his control." Bruce nodded, steeling himself. He reconnected to the empathic amplifier, feeling Kylara's consciousness merge with his own. Together they reached out, not to Craval's troops, but to Craval himself. The backlash was immediate and overwhelming. Craval's mind was a fortress of hate and ambition, but as they poured the collective fear of his army back into him, cracks began to form. Bruce felt the moment Craval's control shattered, the psychic backlash rippling across the battlefield. In the aftermath, as Concordance forces mopped up the last pockets of resistance, Bruce slumped in his chair exhausted. Victory had come at a steep price. Raxor approached, his expression troubled. "We've received a priority transmission from Concordance Intelligence," he said quietly. "Craval, he wasn't acting alone." Bruce looked up, a sense of dread settling in his stomach. "What do you mean?" "They're calling it the Drajkin Hive," Raxor explained, pulling up grainy long-range scans. "An ancient insectoid civilization, awakening at the edge of the galaxy. And they're coming our way." The images showed a vast swarm of ships, like locusts devouring everything in their path. Bruce realized with growing horror that the empathic amplifier, their greatest weapon, would be useless against a hive mind devoid of individual emotion. "What can we do against something like that?" he whispered. Raxor's eyes met his, a mixture of fear and persistence visible in their depths. "I don't know, my friend, but we'll need to push the amplifier beyond anything we've attempted before. The question is, are we willing to pay the price?" As the weight of the coming conflict settled over them, Bruce realized that their greatest challenge still lay ahead. The Drajkin Hive was approaching, and with it, a decision that would shape the fate of all sentient life in the galaxy. Bruce stared at the holographic display, his heart pounding from the implications of the Drajkin Hive's approach. The swarm of alien ships crawled across the projection like a plague of locusts, devouring everything in their path. "We need to push the amplifier beyond its limits," Raxor said, his voice tight with tension. "But the strain on your mind—" Bruce met his friend's gaze, seeing the conflict etched in the Jaren's features. "Whatever it takes," he said softly. The secure tertiary lab hummed with impossibly strong energy as Bruce lay on the integration platform. Kylara stood at his head, her ethereal form shimmering with concentrated power. Raxor's hands hovered over a complex array of controls, his fingers trembling slightly. "Are you ready?" Kylara asked, her voice resonating through Bruce's very being. He nodded, steeling himself for what was to come. The process began, and Bruce's world exploded into agony. His consciousness stretched and tore, reforming into something vast and alien. He felt Kylara's essence intertwining with his own, their merged psyche expanding to encompass the terror-empathy hybrid they had created. Through the haze of pain, Bruce sensed Raxor's steady presence, anchoring him to reality. The Jaren scientist's mind brushed against his, a lifeline in the tempest of raw emotion and shattered thought. When Bruce opened his eyes, the universe had changed. He perceived not just with his physical senses, but with a new awareness that stretched across the fabric of space-time itself. Billions of minds flickered at the edges of his perception, a cacophony of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "Bruce?" Raxor's voice cut through the noise. "Can you hear me?" Bruce turned to his friend, seeing not just Raxor's physical form, but the complex web of emotions and memories that made up his very essence. I can hear everything," he whispered. The Concordance wasted no time in mobilizing their forces. As the Drajkin Hive entered the outer reaches of their territory, Bruce found himself at the heart of the defense strategy. The empathic amplifier, now intrinsically linked to his transformed consciousness, was rerouted through a neural interface that covered half his skull. From the bridge of the Concordance flagship, Bruce watched the Hive's Queen Armada approach. He reached out with his mind, probing the edges of the alien collective consciousness. The hive mind was an impenetrable wall of singular purpose, devoid of individual thought or emotion. "Now, Bruce," Admiral Kraylock commanded, his voice tight with tension. Bruce closed his eyes and unleashed the full fury of his amplified empathy. The psychic assault erupted from him in waves of pure emotional energy, tearing through space like a tsunami of raw feeling. He poured everything into the attack. Love, hate, joy, sorrow, fear, courage. A spectrum of human experience so intense, it threatened to shatter reality itself. The effect on the Drajkin was catastrophic. Their hive mind fractured under the onslaught, individual drones suddenly isolated and confused. Some responded with mindless violence, turning on their own ships in a frenzy of newly awakened individuality. Others seemed to resonate with the empathetic field, their actions becoming erratic and unpredictable. Through it all, Bruce fought to maintain his sense of self. The input from trillions of minds threatened to subsume his identity, dissolving his consciousness into the vast empathetic continuum he had created. Only his connection to Raxor, a thin thread of familiarity in the chaos, kept him tethered to who he was. As the Concordance fleet pressed their advantage, driving the disorganized hive forces back, Bruce felt a subtle shift in the psychic landscape. At the edges of known space, something stirred, a discordant note in the empathetic symphony. He caught fleeting glimpses of a vast, unknowable presence, utterly alien and immune to the power of emotion. The Annihilan were coming. Bruce's eyes snapped open, his body drenched in sweat. "We've won the battle," he gasped, looking at Raxor. "But the war, it's only just beginning." Bruce's consciousness swam in a sea of alien emotions, each psychic wave threatening to erode his sense of self. The universe pulsed around him, a chaotic symphony of fear, rage, and desperation from countless minds across the galaxy. "Bruce?" Raxor's voice cut through the maelstrom. "Can you focus on me?" Bruce blinked, struggling to center his perception on his friend's familiar face. Raxor's form shimmered, overlaid with a kaleidoscope of conflicting emotional imprints. I don't know what's me anymore," Bruce whispered, his voice cracking. Alarm flashed across Raxor's features. He turned to Admiral Kraylock, who stood rigid at the bridge's tactical display. "We need to act now. His mind is fracturing under the strain." Kraylock's eyebrows furrowed. "Agreed. But we can't lose our edge against the Drajkin, not with the Annihilan threat looming." "There may be a solution," a crisp voice interjected. All eyes turned to the tall, severe figure who had entered the bridge. General Xyrax, Thrax's former protege, strode towards them with predatory grace. "An isolation chamber," Xyrax continued, his gaze locked on Bruce, "to purge the external empathetic bleed and stabilize his psyche." Bruce recoiled, a surge of mistrust flooding through him. "No," he growled. "I won't be your lab rat." Kraylock stepped forward, his expression softening. "Bruce, listen to me. Xyrax may represent our best chance at mastering your powers. We need you whole for what's coming." Hours later, Bruce found himself sealed within the sterile confines of the isolation chamber. A web of neural interfaces covered his skull, pulsing with energy. Raxor's worried face peered through the observation window as Xyrax initiated the neuroimmersive trance. Bruce's world dissolved into swirling fractals of thought and emotion. He felt Raxor and Xyrax working to untangle the knots of alien consciousness from his own. Just as a tendril of true self began to emerge, alarm shattered the fragile calm. A Drajkin scout ship materialized within the facility's defensive perimeter, its chitinous hull gleaming with malevolent purpose. The chamber's stasis field flickered and died as a familiar figure emerged from the vessel. "No!" Bruce gasped, recognizing the twisted form of Kraval. The disgraced general's body writhed with Drajkin biomodifications, his eyes glowing with hive mind malice. Kraval's psyche slammed into Bruce's vulnerable consciousness. Tendrils of alien hunger tore through his memories, feeding on trauma and twisting the empathetic link that bound him to Raxor. Bruce screamed as his higher mind collapsed under the assault. Through the haze of psychic agony, Bruce heard Raxor's desperate command. Kylara, now! Infuse the Matrix! A tidal wave of primal terror crashed through Bruce's being. The Altheri empathy-fear hybrid amplified a millionfold overwhelming Craval's mental grip. In that searing moment of clarity, Bruce lashed out. Raw empathy coalesced into a psychic lance, piercing Craval's essence. The renegade general's form distorted, fracturing into motes of anguished insanity that scattered to the void. As Bruce's awareness snapped back to the physical world, he saw Raxor arguing heatedly with Xyrax. Their voices were muffled by the chamber's walls, but Bruce caught fragments that chilled him to his core. Weaponize the chamber itself. Dissolve the hive mind. Sacrifice his individuality. Exhausted and terrified, Bruce could only watch as the Drajican motherships descending from orbit, heralding the next phase of an apocalyptic war. And somewhere beyond, the incomprehensible presence of the Annihilan loomed, a threat that would require an unthinkable sacrifice to face. Bruce's vision swam as Raxor initiated the quantum isolation sequence. The chamber hummed with psionic energy, its matrix intertwining with Bruce's fractured psyche. He felt himself unraveling, his essence dissolving into pure psychotronic force. Raxor, he gasped, his voice barely audible. What's happening to me? The Djaran scientist's face was a mask of concentration and worry. We're channeling your empathetic resonance into a singularity. It's our only chance against the hive. A violent tremor shook the facility. Through the observation window, Bruce glimpsed a terrifying sight. A massive rift tearing open in the sky above the Concordance capital. The Drajkin motherships emerged from the void, their chitinous hulls gleaming with malevolent purpose. Xyrax's cold voice cut through the chaos. Excellent, right on schedule. Raxor spun to face him, comprehension dawning in her eyes. You planned this? The general's lips curled into a cruel smile. The hive mind will be obliterated, but their cybernetic drones, those we can use. Imagine the war machine we could build. You're insane, Raxor snarled, lunging for the control panel. Her fingers flew across the interface, attempting to abort the sequence. Xyrax's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. I'm afraid I can't let you do that. Across the room, concealed agents revealed themselves, weapons trained on Raxor and the loyal Concordant staff. The chamber facility erupted into chaos as Krelok's forces engaged the traitors in desperate combat. Bruce's consciousness stretched to its breaking point, resonating closer to critical mass with each passing second. Through the haze of his disintegrating self, he sensed a familiar presence. Kylara's ethereal form materialized beside him, her eyes filled with ancient sorrow. There's only one way to stop this, she whispered. Before Bruce could respond, Kylara's essence surged into him. He felt her terror empathy, codex downloading directly into his core, merging with the heart of the forming singularity. The world exploded in a maelstrom of raw emotion and psychic energy. Bruce's fragmented mind expanded outward, encompassing the Drajkin armada. He felt the hive's collective consciousness shatter under the empathetic assault, their trans-dimensional rift collapsing in on itself. As the shockwave consumed him, Bruce caught a final glimpse of Raxor. Her eyes widened in shock as tendrils of psionic energy enveloped her, carrying the last echoes of his and Kylara's merged consciousness. Then darkness. Raxor blinked awake, her head pounding. The chamber facility lay in ruins around her, but the sky outside was clear. No sign remained of the Drajkin invasion force. She pushed herself to her feet, stumbling towards a shattered console. As her fingers brushed the controls, a surge of alien emotion flooded her mind. She gasped, feeling the intertwined resonance of Bruce and Kylara pulsing within her. What have I become? She whispered. A junior officer approached, his uniform torn and bloodied. Commander, he said, snapping a weary salute. The hive ships are gone, but our long-range sensors are detecting something. Psionic spores scattered on the solar winds. Raxor nodded, a newfound understanding settling over her. The Queen's essence, their shattered resonance lives on. She gazed out at the devastated cityscape, feeling the weight of countless minds brush against her consciousness. The Concordance had survived, but at a terrible cost. And somewhere out in the vast emptiness of space, the specter of the Annihilan still lurked. Raxor squared her shoulders, embracing the mantle of empathetic concord now etched into her very being. "Prepare a full report for the Council," she ordered. "We have much work to do." Decades passed, and the galaxy settled into an uneasy equilibrium. Raxor, her consciousness forever altered by the merged essences of Bruce and Kylara, stood at the helm of the Concordance Empathic Strategic Command. The peace she maintained was a delicate tapestry, woven from the threads of countless minds bound by a shared empathetic resonance. But beneath this veneer of unity, an insidious threat lurked. On Rikus Sisevi, a remote frontier world, analyst Kilra trudged through knee-deep mud, her hazmat suit barely visible through the planet's perpetual mist. The colony's central hub loomed before her, its walls streaked with rust and decay. "Life signs detected," her assistant's voice crackled through the comms. "But unstable." Kilra's face hardened. She'd seen this before, on other worlds. The telltale signs of... A blood-curdling scream pierced the air. Through the hub's shattered windows, Kilra glimpsed a colonist, his face contorted in primal rage. He pounded his fists against the reinforced glass, leaving smears of blood. "Containment breach," Kilra shouted, activating her psionic dampeners. "Full lockdown, now!" But it was too late. The colonist's eyes rolled back, his body going rigid. A wave of raw emotion, fear, anger, despair, slammed into Kilra, nearly driving her to her knees. The empathetic resonance bypassed every safeguard, infecting her team in seconds. Back on the Concordance capital, Raxor felt the psychic tremor from light years away. Her eyes snapped open, a cold dread settling in her gut. "It's happening again," she whispered. The hive spores dormant for so long had awakened. Raxor's plan was desperate, born of necessity and the echoes of long-dead minds within her. An inverse entropic resonance event, capable of disrupting the hive's mutagenic influence. The risks were immense, but the alternative was unthinkable. On Rikus 7, Raxor stood before the psionic amplifier, her form shimmering with almost unchecked energy. The infected colonists swarmed the perimeter, their howls a cacophony of corrupted emotions. "Initiating resonance cascade," Raxor announced, her voice steady despite the maelstrom building within her. The world exploded in light and sound. Raxor felt herself unraveling, the carefully maintained balance of Bruce and Kalara's essences fragmenting under the strain. The hive's influence shattered, but something else broke with it. Across the galaxy, minds reeled as the imposed empathetic unity crumbled. Worlds plunged into chaos, primal impulses resurging after decades of suppression. The Concordance teetered on the brink of collapse. In the heart of this storm, Kilra made her choice. She stood before the quantum singularity device, its pulsing core a mirror of the turmoil in her soul. With trembling hands, she entered the final sequence. "I'm sorry, Raxor," she whispered, "but this is the only way." The device activated, unleashing a wave of psychic entropy that consumed everything in its path. Stars, planets, entire civilizations, all were unmade in an instant. And then silence. Raxor opened her eyes to a galaxy reborn. The familiar constellations were gone, replaced by an alien sky. Around her, the survivors of the cataclysm stirred, their minds raw and unshielded. In the distance, a faint signal pulsed. Psychic refugees, drawn to the sudden vacuum of empathetic resonance. Raxor reached out with her mind, feeling the first tendrils of a new cosmic tapestry beginning to form. But as she touched these alien thoughts, something else brushed against her consciousness. A familiar presence, twisted and changed, yet undeniably there. Bruce, Kylara, their essence scattered across the cosmos was coalescing once more. The universe held its breath, poised on the cusp of a new age. And in the depths of space, something ancient and terrible stirred, awakened by the psychic rebirth of reality itself.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, Please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.